they fined me for my boat. My boat on my own shoreline. It started with a white envelope taped to my front door. You know the type. Extra stiff paper, the HOA logo printed with enough ink to feel smug, and a font so formal it basically sneered. I opened it, thinking maybe it was an overdue newsletter. No, it was $300 0 violation notice. Unauthorized marine equipment stored on HOA-controlled shoreline. I had to read it twice. Marine equipment? I own a fishing boat, not a battleship. To paint the picture, it's a 14-foot John boat. Green. Aluminum. The same one my granddad taught me to fish in. It sits quietly at the edge of the lake behind my property, tethered to a simple wooden post, half covered in a faded blue tarp. It's not flashy. It doesn't leak oil. It just sits, waiting. Apparently that was offensive. The letter claimed the boat violated aesthetic regulations and compromised the communal visual experience of the lakefront. The kicker? They gave me 72 hours to remove it or face escalating daily fines. I stood in my kitchen, letter in one hand, coffee in the other, and audibly said, "They do realize I own the lake, right?" Well, let's rewind a bit. Inherited this property from my grandfather, retired Navy vet, part-time bass fisherman, and full-time lover of peace and quiet. The house sat at the far edge of the neighborhood development, nestled into a wooded slope that curved around the lake. When he bought the land in the 70s, it came with something unique. The entire eastern half of the lakefront, plus water rights extending 30 feet out. The developers later built the HOA subdivision on the other side of the lake. They landscaped, paved paths, built docks, and over the years, they just assumed all the water was theirs. Granddad didn't care. He didn't like drama. He just fished, waved at the occasional kayaker, and ignored the HOA entirely. Now he was gone, the deed was mine, and apparently, the HOA was feeling brave. So I did what any rational human would do after receiving a nonsense fine. I walked out to my backyard and stared at the boat. It wasn't hurting anyone, it wasn't loud, it wasn't even in the water, it was resting on a muddy slope, half in reeds, and yet someone, somewhere, had seen it and thought, "This offends me spiritually." I knew exactly who. Marla Dunst. Ocho president, self-appointed guardian of neighborhood harmony, known for her obsession with symmetrical mulch lines and passive-aggressive next-door posts. Marla once fined a family for painting their shed too rustic. She threatened to have a tree removed because it was leaning at a disruptive angle. And last Halloween, she confiscated a teenager's animatronic zombie because it violated moral code, whatever that means. And now she had her sights set on my boat. I called the HOA office. The receptionist sounded terrified. Mr. Wallace, you're on the list for callback by President Dunst herself. She asked me not to speak on the matter directly. Of course she did. 2 hours later, I got the call. "Mr. Wallace," Marla began, her tone so syrupy it made my teeth ache. "We've received multiple complaints about your vessel." "A vessel?" "Yes, it presents a visual inconsistency with the rest of the waterfront experience." "You mean my property?" She paused. "The shoreline is managed by the HOA for the benefit of all community members." I smiled. "You sure about that?" "Not sure." "Because I have the deed, and according to the county plat map, the shoreline, along with 30 feet of lake water in front of it, is privately owned by me." There was a long silence on the line. Then, in her best attempt to regain footing, she said, "Well, even if that were the case, the HOA oversees all visible elements of the lakefront, and we're prepared to enforce compliance." That's when I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a power play. And if Marla wanted to play games, fine. But she clearly didn't know who owned the board. The thing about owning a lake, especially when no one realizes you do, is that it gives you leverage most people don't expect. Especially HOA presidents with clipboards and inflated egos. After that call with Marla, I dusted off the manila envelope my grandfather had labeled, "My permanently water right legal." It was full of maps, correspondence with the original developers, and the deed itself. Not only did it confirm my ownership of the entire eastern shoreline, but it included a clause most people would miss. Sole and exclusive rights to control access, use, and anchorage privileges for any watercraft or recreational activity within a 30-foot perimeter from shore. Translation: I could ban paddle boats. I could ban fishing. I could ban cannonball jumps. If I really wanted to. And now, I kind of wanted to. But I didn't want to go nuclear just yet. Instead, I decided to test the water, so to speak. That weekend, I made a few modest adjustments to the shoreline. New sign that read, "Private property, lake used by permission only." A second smaller sign that said, "HOA board members prohibited without written consent." And my favorite, a bright blue cooler next to the boat, labeled, "For Moose, not for Marla." Yes, I reused the name. My new golden retriever earned it. Moose, the second, lay by the boat, wagging his tail, unaware of the political storm brewing behind his sleepy eyes. Monday morning I got a knock. 3 knocks, actually. Marla? Glenn, still HOA VP, still looking like he needed a therapist, and some guy in business casual holding a folder. Probably the HOA's legal advisor, which is to say, a friend with a printer. "Mr. Wallace," Marla began, her voice sharp, "you're escalating this situation. You fined me for my boat? It was a violation of community standards. On land I own." She huffed. "We believe the water itself is a shared resource." I smiled. "Want to test that belief in court?" That threw them. Business casual guy shuffled his folder. "Do you have documentation?" I pulled out my copy of the plat map. "Right here. County stamped. Dated. Includes water rights. I can show you the clause if you'd like, or we can take a stroll down to the shoreline." Glenn whispered something to Marla. Marla, to her credit, didn't flinch. "Even if that's accurate, the HOA has always treated the lake as communal." "Cool story," I said, "but law, greater than tradition." And then I dropped a real bomb. I'm filing a restriction of access notice with the county this week. Effective immediately, any non-approved individuals entering or using the water in my zone will be subject to trespass laws. The legal advisor paled. Glenn said, "Wait, you're banning everyone from the lake?" I shrugged. "Just for my part." Marla clenched her jaw. "This is petty." "No, this is me responding to petty." Then I handed her a formal letter of notice, pre-drafted, signed, and notarized, stating that all HOA recreational use of the Eastern Shore was revoked, pending a full reevaluation of ownership boundaries. "Have a lovely day," I said. They walked off. Marla's heels hit the pavement like a drum roll of impending doom. By Friday, I had installed fencing, not ugly chain link, but classic split rail wood. Elegant, non-aggressive, but firm. Each fence post was topped with a little carved fish. My grandfather would have loved it. I added motion sensor lights, and for fun, a solar-powered camera drone that slowly patrolled the lake's edge, not to spy, just to remind them someone was watching now. That weekend, I sat by the water in a folding chair, drink in hand, while Moose snored beside me. 3 families walked by with fishing poles, read the new signs, and turned around. One dad looked genuinely crushed. "I used to fish here with my kid," he said. I nodded. "You still can, just not through the HOA." I handed him a business card. On the back, "Make access, permission. No affiliation required." Because if they were going to fine me for a boat on my lake, then I was going to do more than ban them. I was going to monetize the fallout. By Monday, the HOA was in full meltdown mode. Their private Facebook group, normally reserved for posts about lost cats and passive-aggressive rants about garbage bins, had become a digital war zone. Screenshots started circulating. People were furious. "Wait, Wallace owns a lake? We've been paying HOA fees for years to maintain that shoreline. Why did Marla say it was community property? My kids learned to fish there. This is outrageous." And then someone found the plat map. I didn't leak it, but I wasn't exactly hiding it either. After all, I'd uploaded it to the county property portal. Public record. Let's just say the right link accidentally ended up in a neighborhood group chat titled HOA Bloopers and Drama. Things spiraled. A petition began circulating to hold a special HOA election. People wanted answers. People wanted refunds. People wanted Marla gone. Meanwhile, I was busy living my best lake owner life. I built a proper dock, nothing extravagant, just sturdy enough for the boat, a couple of chairs, and a small, "Welcome fisherman, unless you're Marla" sign. Moose loved it. He'd sit there all morning watching ducks, occasionally barking at a leaf floating too close to shore like he was the sheriff of the water. One afternoon, an elderly man I'd never met walked over. "You Wallace's grandson?" he asked. I nodded. "Your granddad used to let me fish here," he said. "Taught me how to tie a Paloma knot on that stump right there." We sat for a while. He brought jerky, I brought beer. We didn't talk about the HOA once. It was perfect. Back on the other side of the lake, Marla wasn't doing quite so well. The fence sent her over the edge, literally. According to Glenn, who now messaged me like we were old war buddies, she tried to organize a community kayak day. Except when they arrived, the signs, fences, and drone camera stopped them cold. Someone took a video. In it, Marla stands at the fence shouting, "You don't own the water! You can't own water!" while the drone gently hovers over her like a very judgmental hummingbird. The clip made it to TikTok. In the caption, HOA president tries to invade private lake, gets owned by drone. It hit 1.2 million views in 2 days. The comments were brutal. She just said you can't own water like she's discovering laws don't bend to her will. Plot twist, he owns the fish too. Bro turned HOA into HOM. My favorite comment just said, "Lake Chad." I printed that one and taped it to the inside of my tackle box. Then came the formal HOA meeting, held in the community clubhouse. It was standing room only. Marla tried to call it to order, but the energy was off. People had questions, real ones. And this time, nobody let her dodge. Did you know the lake wasn't ours? Why did we pay fees to maintain land we didn't own? Why did you find someone on their own property? She floundered, claimed historical misunderstanding, blamed the original developer, cited a long-standing visual tradition. Visual tradition? That's when I stood up. Didn't yell, didn't gloat. I just calmly read from the deed, showed the map, explained the law. Then I looked around and said, "I've got nothing against anyone here. I grew up fishing this lake. I want people to enjoy it. But when someone tries to control what they don't own and punish me for honoring my family's land, that's not tradition. That's trespassing with a clipboard." I drop it. The room clapped. I'm not exaggerating, actual clapping. That night, Marla resigned for personal reasons. A week later, I launched lakeaccesspass.com, a simple website where residents could request permission slips to fish, kayak, or swim on my side of the lake. Free for families. $5.00 per visit for HOA board members. Yes, I'm petty, but reasonably petty. The first permit request? Oh, Glenn. Subject line. My kids missed the dock. I promise no clipboards. Approved. With Marla gone and the lake drama cooling off, you'd think things would return to normal. You'd be wrong. The HOA, now leaderless and panicked, tried to do the thing that bureaucracies do best when they mess up, overcorrect. Suddenly, they weren't just backpedaling, they were cartwheeling into chaos. First, they sent out a neighborhood-wide apology email titled Verification regarding lakefront usage and recent events. It opened with a vague, lawyer-approved paragraph that danced around accountability like it owed them money. But the highlight came at the end. We look forward to repairing trust and reestablishing a positive working relationship with Mr. Wallace, the property owner in question. In question, I nearly spit out my coffee. Then came the most unintentionally hilarious part. They tried to rename the lake, not officially, just within their little community map. The HOA newsletter announced a rebranding effort to honor unity, proposing the name Harmony Waters. They even held a poll. 3 options: Harmony Waters, Unity Pond, and Tranquil Vista Lake. I emailed Glenn privately. Why not just call it Sorry We Screwed Up Cove? He didn't respond, but the poll mysteriously disappeared the next day. Meanwhile, LakeAccessPass.com took off. In the first week, over 60 residents requested permits. I kept it casual. Simple Google Forms, instant email replies, a short list of rules. No littering. No blasting country music past 9 p.m. Dogs can swim, but they need to, like moose. I wasn't trying to be a gatekeeper. I just wanted people to understand this place is personal. It's legacy. It's not a shared amenity you tack on to your HOA fees and forget. Most folks got it. In fact, some even thanked me. I used to think this lake was a dumb puddle, one teenager wrote. Now, it feels like part of the neighborhood again. I cried, don't judge me. Then the press called. Much Media, just a local podcast called Suburban Standoffs. They did an episode called The Man Who Owned the Lake. It was 15 minutes long and deeply dramatic. They added lake sounds in the background. At one point, they said, this wasn't just a boat. It was a boundary line. And Wallace, he drew it in the water. The host sounded like she was narrating a Ken Burns documentary. Moose even got a shout-out. The unsung golden retriever who just wanted peace. We gained 3,000 new followers on Moose's Instagram that week. Yes, I started another one. Yes, it's called At Merce Rules, the lake. We even started getting lake fan mail. A retired artist mailed us a watercolor painting of the dock with Moose in the corner. Head tilted like he was judging the HOA from afar. We framed it and hung it in the hallway. And through it all, the boat remained. Still parked right where it had always been. Still quiet. Still modest. Still mine. Somehow, it had become more than a fishing boat. It was a symbol. A floating middle finger to overreach. A rowboat-shaped reminder that sometimes the only way to win is to own the ground they think they control. Marla? Well, rumor had it she moved to a town with stricter zoning laws and less water. Someone said she bought a condo in a high-rise with no pets allowed, no yard, no boats, only rules. Honestly, fitting. But the most satisfying part? The HOA held a summer event 2 months later. Ice cream social, kids' games, hot dogs. They asked me if they could borrow my shoreline for the event. So much, I smiled. Of course, I said, for a small fee. That fee, $1. But I made them sign a contract. In bold letters, it read, "The owner of the Eastern Shoreline grants temporary, conditional access to the boat stays. So does the dog." Glenn signed it. The event went great. People laughed. Kids played. Moose wore a tiny life jacket and got a standing ovation for doing literally nothing. It was perfect. And when it was over, they left the area clean. No trash, no chaos. Just quiet water, soft wind, and one very content boat, bobbing ever so slightly, as if nodding in approval. Summer turned to fall, and the lake settled into its natural rhythm. Misty mornings, still afternoons, sunsets that painted the water like a postcard. But the neighborhood? That had changed forever. The HOA, now functioning under what Glenn humbly referred to as a more collaborative spirit, had learnt its lesson. They weren't just careful now, they were deferential. Rules were reviewed, bylaws reworded, and they stopped pretending to control what they didn't own. Funny what one aluminum boat can accomplish. I didn't set out to be a local legend, but somehow, that's what happened. People started knocking on my door, not to complain, but to say thanks. Parents who brought their kids to fish. Retirees who just wanted to sit on a quiet dock. One guy brought a six-pack and just said, "Dude, respect." We didn't even talk. We just sat there and let the lake do the work. And Moose? Moose was living his best life. He had his spot on the dock, his pile of tennis balls, his Instagram Q&A Fridays. Yes, that became a thing. He got fan art. He got treats mailed to our P.O. box. Someone made him a tiny admiral's hat, and it fit perfectly. At this point, I didn't just own a lake. I owned a story. A story that started with a fine and ended with a neighborhood redefined. A story about boundaries, not just legal ones, but personal ones. About standing your ground when someone tries to quietly erase the line. Marla had tried to control everything, and in doing so, she lost the very thing she wanted most: respect. She thought being in charge meant ownership. But real ownership isn't about rules and clipboards. It's about roots, about history, about showing up with a smile, a map, and the receipts to back it all up. I still keep the fine notice. It's in a frame now, right next to the painting of the dock. The letter that said, "Your marine equipment violates OA Lakefront guidelines." And underneath it, I added my own plaque. That's funny. I am the Lakefront. So, yeah, the HOA fined me for my boat. What they didn't know, they own the lake. And now, they fish by invitation only.